You mentioned the ruling party's proposed constitutional 17th Amendment Act and the rationalization of provinces. Can you explain what this bill entails and why opposition parties are so firmly against it?
Well, I think let's look at the content of the actual mooted amendment, Constitution Amendment Bill. The 17th Constitution Amendment Bill, in terms of its memorandum, seems to suggest that there is a cabinet approval for an amendment to the Constitution giving powers, executive powers particularly, to local municipalities and to take away some of those powers to the national government to promote regional economies of scale, firstly. Secondly, efficiencies in the delivery of services, in the transfer of assets, in the control of and the use and deployment of those assets and so forth. And so, ultimately, I think the debate around the 17th Constitutional Amendment Bill is going to follow a bifurcated basis on will it be better for development if we take certain executive powers away from municipalities to the national government, or on the other side of the divide, will it substantially affect our democracy, not our development, but our democracy? And of course, democracy and development mean they're related, but they mean different things. Democracy is about the questions of responsiveness, accountability, representation, oversight. Now, clearly there is a relationship between all of those factors, representativity, accountability, oversight, responsiveness, to the way in which the state structure as an instrument of service delivery will function. So that close interrelationship is a necessary one, but I think the way in which we understand what government aims to do, we have to understand them on those two different terms. Now, on developmental terms, it seems as if some of the ideas in the 17th Constitution Amendment Bill might in fact promote regional efficiencies, it might promote economies of scale, it might promote better integration of communities and of the state delivery system. But it is very critical, I think, to underscore that that can only happen provided that there is efficient state capacity, there is the ability of the state to do so, to hire the kind of people that it requires, who have the skills to do so, and the system itself is well defined. This amendment also, if we talk about and look at it in its broader historical context, would be the fourth or the fifth transformation of the actual system. Because pre-1994, you had 4 provinces, you had local authorities which did have extensive powers, but those powers were not used to the benefit of all South Africans. Because in addition to that kind of state in which you had 4 provinces, executive authority and municipal government, you also had Bantustans. Bantustans which were regional states, so to speak, which weren't recognized by anyone but South Africa, which then had to be transformed to be brought together into a unitary state. That happened in 94. 6 years later, it was realized that the local government system had to be transformed again. And so we had a redemarcation process, we had a rationalization of the original in 1994, close to 804, 820 municipalities reduced to 284, given both extensive administrative, executive, as well as legislative powers defined in the Constitution. Now you will have another phase of transformation of the system. And so one should, or at least our government is going to have to be careful not to engage in what one would call transformation fatigue, because clearly it requires new institutional processes, new institutional mechanisms, and new definitions, roles, functions, and mandates, which is going to take a good few years to actually get upstream. They're not going to be able to function efficiently and effectively overnight. Alongside that, remember in 1994, because we were left with a situation in which we had 4 provinces, along with the Bantustans, exclusion of a large majority of South Africans, brought into a state system which then defined 9 provinces, along with the fact that there was a transformation of the local government in the bringing in of the Bantustans. That was a fairly complex system because, again, you created a regional structure between local government and national government which gave both legislative and executive powers. It was a product of compromise in 1994 because clearly the ANC at that time was in favor of a unitary state rather than have degrees of federalism. But the New National Party back then and what was the Democratic Party rather than the Democratic Alliance, a precursor to the DA, were also in favor of the provinces and a greater degree of federalism, which the ANC then actually bought into. 15 years into democracy, I think what the ANC will begin to realize with respect to the provincial debate is that even though, again, it may be more efficient in some people's minds to promote better service delivery, better state efficiency, better state capacity, if you do away with this intermediary level, which has both legislative and executive powers, as defined in the Constitution, you may promote greater efficiency. But again, this will be underscored by three preconditions. The first is that there will have to be capacity and capability to be able to engage in the kind of efficiencies and effectiveness required. Secondly, that the structure and the new system is well defined and adequate mandates are defined and properly delimited. And thirdly, that you will add, even though you will take away, degrees of accountability, because that's what the provinces do. They provide an intermediary level of representation and accountability, and you'll be taking that away, which means you would have to consign greater powers for oversight, for accountability, for representativity at local government level. Because clearly that function, the democratic function of accountability and responsiveness at an intermediary level will have to go somewhere. And clearly the national state would be or the national government and the national parliament would be far too far removed from local citizens. Now, the evidence over the last 15 years is that yes, the provinces have not functioned effectively. There have been a drain on resources, but there have been some calculations that if you do away with the provinces as a legislative and an executive structure, the saving you would make is on average between 2 and 5% of total GDP, which is not a terribly large amount of money. There is then the second question which will arise, and that is that if you do away with the provinces, you cannot do away with the provinces completely. Clearly, some of those powers and functions would have to be taken nationally, which, as I just mentioned, may be far too removed from ordinary citizens. Or secondly, it will have to be devolved to local government level to give them greater powers, executive and legislative. The trouble with the second proposal about giving more powers to local government is that levels of efficiency, levels of effectiveness, and even levels of political oversight at local government has not been very good over the past 15 years. Hence, we see the kind of social protests which have occurred. And so the difficulty, I think, is going to be around this definition of the role of this new intermediary structure if they do away with it. And secondly, there will also be political dimensions, clearly, because I think in the 15 years that the ANC has used the provinces, it has been seen by some political players in the ANC as a level in which you can build political support but also dispense with political patronage. And if you take away with that, the difficulties that the ANC may find as a political party, that this intermediary level of mobilization politically is also taken away. And what that might come at the cost of is a bunch of people who believe that they have been, whose powers, functions, and privileges have been taken away by the ANC, and they may decide to opt to join one or other political party, in which the fears of the spectre of COPE being able to draw some political support away from some members of the ANC is still a very real fear. So I think this is going to be a decision which is going to be very heatedly debated, and clearly the ANC will find no easy solutions, either at the government or otherwise, for both the question of rationalizing or doing away with provinces or giving more powers to local government through the 17th Amendment Bill. Now, what opposition parties are arguing is that the Constitution Amendment Bill is worded so widely that it would give the national government such immense powers to be able to intervene at the local level, to take away some of those executive powers and exercise it through the party. And in a context in which perceptions are very real that political power has moved away both from the executive and the parliament towards the party headquarters, it effectively would mean that if this power is given to national government, and if national government is controlled by party headquarters, by logic, local government would then effectively, even in an executive sense, be controlled by the political party rather than the elected representatives. And even though, I mean, democratically speaking, because those elected representatives would come from the ruling party, they would legitimately have that mandate to do so. But there is the question that there are many municipalities which are not ruled by the ANC, and there is one province now, post-2009, which is not governed by the ANC, and that's the Western Cape. So there are fears that the ANC is trying to punish opposition party which won in the Western Cape and punish certain voters who may have voted that way. Clearly the rationale behind the 17th Amendment Bill, purely in developmental terms, does seem to make sense, but the precondition there is that that wording in the bill has to be done in a way which will have a developmental impact rather than take away some of the democratic accountability and responsiveness issues that local government and provincial government does potentially promote at the moment. Clearly the idea of regional economies of scale, better integration, better cohesiveness in the government system is a prerequisite. But whether this can be achieved through the 17th Amendment Bill as worded as it currently is, that's a different question. And I'm not sure that if it given such wide powers, that it will necessarily only have a positive developmental impact. I think it might have a negative democratic impact, even though it will, to a degree, assist in giving a broader mandate to the regional electricity distributors, which is in effect what is hoped the 17th Amendment Bill would do. But clearly I think there is a requirement that that bill has to be worded more precisely, more clearly, and not as widely as it currently stands, which potentially gives too much power to national government to be able to make interventions where it's necessary. There have been previous instances in which government has made interventions, particularly in around 15 to 20 municipalities and provincial governments to a degree, through the then Department of Provincial and Local Government, through at the local government level Project Consolidate. And there's been no real report or evaluation of what that national government intervention has yielded in those local areas or in the provinces where it did intervene. So clearly these are open questions which have not been concluded, and I think there will be a long raging debate with much evidence which is lacking in effect, which is going to have to inform this debate, because at the moment it seems as if this debate is largely concentrated at the conceptual level.